In my experience, I did the first preliminary investigation of mass graves in Rwanda and traveled throughout the country. And it is until you get into those communities that you learn that there were executions that took place outside of the town or near the prison. Understand in Syria there are 27 or more prisons that were used.
Bashar al-Assad's machinery of death has come into new light after his toppling earlier this month. A US-based advocacy group said that a mass grave outside Damascus contained the bodies of at least 100,000 people killed by the former government. And a senior international war crime prosecutor, Stephen Rapp, said the scenes show the worst abuses since the Nazis. Well, I've been speaking to Eric Stover, co-faculty director of the Human Rights Center at the University of California, Berkeley. I asked him what he made of those comparisons.
I'm not surprised. When you look at the tens of thousands of people who have disappeared in Syria and the need to have accountability for the crimes that took place, I'm not surprised at all. I've worked in Rwanda, Bosnia, and many countries around the world. And the most important thing I want to begin with, from a forensic perspective, is you conduct investigations of mass graves for three reasons. Number one is to identify and determine the manner and cause of death of those who died, and this is to be done for the families and the community. This is really important. It's the most important thing. Second, the when you conduct forensic investigations, you do it in a manner that the evidence will be court admissible. And this is going to be very important in Syria if we're going to have accountability down the line. And third, you conduct the investigation to set the historical record straight. It's going to be a big challenge in Syria, no question, but it's going to take coordination both with the new government and with international agencies that have been collecting evidence for years.
Yes, and I see Stephen Rapp, the UN War Crimes ambassador, has identified two mass grave sites in the towns of Kutafia and Nahja near Damascus. How many more do you think there might be? How well known are these sites?
There'll be many more. In my experience, I did the first preliminary investigation of mass graves in Rwanda and traveled throughout the country. And it is until you get into those communities that you learn that there were executions that took place outside of the town or near the prison. Understand in Syria there are 27 or more prisons that were used. So usually, in my experience, you'll often find that those graves are located near the prisons. Um, and so what's important here is that there be coordination and collaboration with the new government and with international organizations, including the International Commission on Missing Persons, who I worked with in Bosnia quite extensively. And they are important because they can bring some expertise in to conduct these in a manner that you will get identifications made of the skeletal remains and that you will also collect it in a court admissible manner for evidence future for accountability.
Both Assad Senior, Hafiz al-Assad, and Bashar al-Assad are accused of a system of state terror which became a machinery of death. Now, some appalling totalitarian genocidal regimes documented what they did with great detail. Do we know how forensic the Syrian Ba'ath Party was in its appalling work, in its machinery of death?
Well, that I don't know. Will not speculate on that. But what I will tell you from an investigator's perspective, when you go in to do an investigation like this, you're collecting testimonial evidence. This can often be evidence from witnesses who were there and witnessed it, but it can also be from those who conducted the killings. And secondly, you want to get documentary evidence, and that means there are files, there are recordings, there are clearly open source video clips perhaps taken. And thirdly, there's the physical evidence, and that's what the exhumations of the graves. And so what's important is to triangulate these three. So what is going to be important now, I would say, and really to the government in Syria now, is to really ask for help and to stop the Russian grab of documents or people going on to sites. It's very difficult because people want to go and see the sites and but if you really want to have accountability and identification of the remains in the future, you need to preserve those sites so a proper on the ground criminal investigation can take place.
And I see that the Canadian lawyer Bill Wiley, the director of the Commission on International Justice and Accountability, has predicted that Russia will hand over Bashar al-Assad within a few years when it no longer has use for him. He's confident that he'll be facing some kind of justice within 4 years. How confident would you be given what's emerging?
Well, let's see. Again, I don't speculate. I simply think that there should be pressure put on Russia for Assad and others to be turned over for prosecution. But right now, what we need is to develop the capacity and the coordination and collaboration among what's happening in Syria today and in terms of going to sites, to many of these prisons and so on, is for the international community to be able to come in and assist and help protect that evidence so it can be used later in trials. This has always been what was important in Bosnia, Rwanda, Argentina, Guatemala, other countries where investigations taken place, was to preserve this evidence so it can be court admissible in the future.
Yeah. One thing that just struck me, Eric, is the impact of all of this on the surviving populations in small countries like Rwanda. I've been there, and you feel that this pall still hangs over the people, even though those appalling events happened in 1994. What do you think the impact might be in a place like Syria, where this is fresh, it's very recent?
Well, what happens in understanding this is from many years working with for example, the Guatemalan forensic anthropology team, the Argentina forensic anthropology team, working with them for years. And these are students who were trained to go out and carry out these exhumations after the change in government. But what was important in dealing with the communities and understand that there is there's a feeling of hope and denial among family members. They're hoping their loved one is still alive, but also the denial. And what it happens is with these teams working with the families in the communities, they can build the trust and they can help the families with the gathering of what's called pre-mortem evidence. For example, did someone have a broken arm, certain diseases, to help with the identification. Collecting DNA samples is going to be extremely important, particularly in Syria, and how to coordinate that with the database and so on. So what I'm trying to say here is that we need not only to be looking at accountability, but to look at the Syrian people and the importance it is to work with them in order to find their loved ones and give them a proper burial.
And that was Eric Stover, co-faculty director of the Human Rights Centre and Research Professor of Law at UC Berkeley. James says, Syria mass graves. It's noteworthy how the pro-Palestine mob Corbin et al. Have gone quiet about the discovery of Assad's cruelty. It shows a hypocrisy while they lie about Israel. Now, some of our listeners will agree with all of that. Some will agree with part and some won't agree at all, James. But thank you very much. I say this because I'm just looking at a clip of Corbin, as in Jeremy Corbyn, former Labour leader, online. This is he stood up in the Houses of Parliament last week and he said, and he also tweeted, he says, as the people of Syria come out of the horrors of war, torture and imprisonment, I asked the Foreign Secretary what he was doing to protect the rights of Kurdish people and whether he would call for an end to Israel's illegal occupation of the Golan Heights. Oh, there we go. All right. So, James, thank you very much for your message. As a response to what James had to say there, and also what I've just read about Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn. And then Nafisa says, these sites of mass graves and prisons should be considered as a crime scene and preserved. Is there not a worldwide organisation of experts who can offer their services to Syria and assist and advise in this most important matter? I'm not sure what that worldwide organisation is, apart from the UN and various offshoots of it, Nafisa, but there are certainly specialists, including the gentleman I've just spoken to, Eric Stover, who do go to these places, go on the ground, and then work and try and help the local people and help those trying to document and then marshal all the evidence so that one day those responsible can be prosecuted.